I started sensing that something was wrong on a Monday morning while reviewing payment reports from a major client group labeled internal priority. The numbers didn't match. The amounts recorded looked one way, but the actual bank records showed something different, between 3 and 7% higher than the original invoices. At first, I assumed it was a data entry mistake, but the deeper I checked, the clearer it became. These discrepancies weren't random. They followed a distinct, intentional pattern. The client was Patterson and Miles Holdings, a well-known real estate group based in Austin, Texas. They had been with our firm long before I joined. Within the system, at least 4 subsidiaries operated under their name. Each had different tax IDs but funneled money into the same 3 destination accounts, repeating every month. What chilled me was that these accounts belonged to companies that had never been audited, had no official websites, and no verifiable office addresses. Just names, like Westcrest Logistics, Halverton Services, or Elmori Consulting. I cross-checked every invoice against wire transfer orders, and gradually a sophisticated pattern emerged. The internal invoices listed lower costs, but the actual funds transferred were significantly higher, with the excess routed through those shell companies. If this was a coincidence, it was a deliberate one. I printed the entire file, set nearly an inch thick, tabbed in yellow highlights. I didn't know what I was walking into, but one thing was clear. This wasn't an accounting error. This was money laundering. Around 10 a.m. that day, I knocked on the office door of the department director, Mr. Brett Langston. At 52, Brett had been in the industry too long to be surprised by something like this. He wasn't the friendly or enthusiastic type. He wore a stone-cold expression, even when he smiled. When I entered, he was still texting, phone face down on his desk, looking like he'd shove everything aside if I became inconvenient. "I have some data I need to present," I said, handing him the folder. Brett looked up, squinting at the cover. "What is this, Carter?" "There are transactions linked to Patterson and Miles I think you should see." I pointed at the first flag section. "The payments are being inflated systematically, routed through untraceable shell companies. The entire cash flow follows a fixed pattern." He didn't say anything at first, just flipped through several pages. His expression shifted from disinterest to contemplation. By page 12, Brett closed the folder. His fingers tapped lightly on the cover, as if weighing whether to explode or pretend none of this existed. "That client brings in over $3 million a quarter," he said slowly. "Do you understand what that means?" I didn't answer. His gaze moved from the folder to me, colder, sharper. "Let this go, Carter," he said, tone firm and low. "This isn't serious. Big companies have their own way of doing things. Don't dig further." I stayed silent. No nod, no shake. One question echoed in my head. Why would a department head show zero concern over illegal behavior happening on his watch? He ended the conversation with a warning glance. "I trust your professionalism. Don't make me regret that." I left his office without another word. The folder remained on his desk. What Brett didn't know was that I'd already kept digital copies of everything. On my personal hard drive, a new folder had just been created. Patterson_transactions_review. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't unsee the truth. The next morning, at 8:17 a.m., I received an email from HR with the subject line, "Urgent Meeting, 9:00 a.m." No message body, no explanation. I walked into the third-floor conference room, usually used for strategic briefings, but this time the room felt sterile. No smiles, no small talk, no coffee. Only one person was there, Donna, the HR director, in her 50s, known for her cautious wording. "Carter," she began without looking me in the eyes, "the company is restructuring the financial analysis department. Unfortunately, your position no longer aligns with future direction." I stayed silent, face neutral. "The severance has been processed. Final payment will be deposited within 3 business days. Please collect your belongings today by 1 p.m. I asked no questions, didn't argue, didn't act surprised. That unsettled Donna more than I expected. She looked at me like she was waiting for me to beg. "I understand," I said, standing. "I'll be out on time." I exited through the fire escape to avoid eyes. There was no pain, only the cold clarity of someone who'd seen it coming. I sat down at my desk and powered on my laptop for the last time. Deep within the internal server was a directory used for archiving outdated financial reports. I logged into the data management system using a fallback admin account I'd once been given during a past audit project. Something everyone else had forgotten, but I hadn't. I downloaded the full 9-month transaction history involving Patterson and Miles, complete with ledger records and contract files. Then, I opened a newly created personal email under a pseudonym and sent everything there. I wiped all browser history and emails from the company device. I even left the screen on the weekly report page as if I'd been working till the final second. No one looked up as I walked out of the building. No one said goodbye. It was as if I'd never existed. That confirmed one thing. Brett had orchestrated this well in advance. I drove aimlessly around town for nearly an hour before parking in an empty lot next to the old science museum where my grandmother used to take me on holidays. I sat there staring at a draft email I had written the day before. Recipient: Jessica Morano, age 40, internal compliance officer at a nonprofit I'd been introduced to during last year's finance summit. My finger hovered over send, but something fell off. I needed to be more prepared. That's when the message appeared. No contact name. Hope you understand why this had to happen. I stared at it, no signature, but I knew who sent it. Underneath the politeness was a veiled threat. I didn't respond. Instead, I went home, opened my personal laptop, and created a spreadsheet. I reconstructed every manipulated transaction. Timestamps, destination accounts, approver IP, over 120 entries. More than $5 million routed through entities that didn't exist on any legitimate database. There was no doubt. This wasn't administrative oversight. This was organized money laundering. And I had only scraped the surface. I encrypted everything and uploaded it to a secure cloud folder with dual-layer passwords. Then, I printed all 327 pages, numbered them by hand, and locked them in my home safe. That night, sleep didn't come. Every car outside, every creak in the hallway made me alert. Not because of fear, but because I was waiting for a signal. To decide whether to go public or wait for one more move. The next morning, as I brewed coffee, I noticed a white envelope under my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a note. You're going too far. Step back before you get swept away. I placed a note on the table without a word. I was sure of one thing now. I wasn't the only one who knew. But I might be the only one ready to expose it. I sat at the kitchen table, the threat still lying next to my cold coffee. My mind was spinning, not from fear, but because the pieces were finally fitting together. Fragments from the past 2 years were no longer random. They were a calculated system with purpose. The Patterson and Miles account wasn't the first one to raise suspicions. About 8 months earlier, I was assigned to assist with a series of routine reports for a client group named Rowan Capital, a familiar name on the firm's internal Do Not Touch list. The system flagged a strange wire transfer in red, but when I tried to access the details, an error popped up saying my access was restricted. I assumed it was a permissions issue and didn't think much of it. By the next morning, the report had vanished from the processing queue, as if it had never existed. Later, I learned that the only person authorized to handle anything related to Rowan Capital was Grant McKinley, a mid-level executive who rarely appeared but had unusual approval authority. Grant never attended routine finance meetings, never showed up on the internal website, yet his name always appeared in the priority oversight roster. Once, I caught him speaking with Brett Langston in the elevator. When the door opened to my floor, Grant looked at me, expressionless, not hostile or surprised, just calculated, like he was filing my face away for future reference. That glance, brief as it was, chilled me to the bone. Around the same time, an analyst named Owen Chambers suddenly left the company. No official explanation. Internally, it was labeled personal health reasons, which everyone knew was just a shield. Owen was the only person I ever saw openly question the integrity of the transaction systems. During one lunch break, he had asked me, "Have you ever wondered why certain accounts never get flagged, no matter how inconsistent they are?" I remember nervously laughing and telling him it was better not to ask. He shrugged and replied, "That's why they get away with it, because everyone thinks silence is safer." 2 weeks later, Owen was gone. His desk empty. His internal email shut off overnight. No one ever mentioned him again. Another memory came rushing back, something I had tried to bury but could no longer ignore. About 3 months before I got fired, Brett unexpectedly invited me to lunch. That had never happened before. He picked a quiet Italian restaurant in the north end of the city, far from anywhere other employees would go. When I arrived, he was already seated, sleeves rolled up, offering a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Carter, I see a lot of potential in you," he began, pouring water while glancing sideways. "But potential in the wrong place is a waste. You understand?" I nodded slightly, unsure where he was going with this. "This company has its own way of operating, things that don't need to be written down," he continued. "The key is knowing when to ask questions and when not to." The conversation never directly mentioned Patterson and Miles or any specifics, but his words were laced with subtle warnings. A boundary existed, and those who crossed it didn't return. That night, I went home, opened my laptop, and deleted every note I had ever written about Rowan Capital. I told myself it was safer not to get involved with things I didn't fully understand. But now, everything had changed. Back in my home office, I opened the drawer and pulled out the USB I had used to back up all reports since the start of the year. I had flagged 7 accounts with the same troubling patterns: recurring payments, shell companies, and altered metadata. Anyone reviewing them would see this wasn't random. My phone vibrated, an unknown number. I answered. A low female voice came through. "Carter, my name is Evelyn Blake. We have a mutual friend, Owen Chambers." I gripped the phone tighter. My heart thudded. "Who are you?" "I work in the internal oversight division of a federal organization," she said. "Owen passed me some information before he was forced to go quiet, and I believe what you're holding could be the final piece." I said nothing. 3 seconds passed in silence. But after that call, I knew I could never go back to being a bystander. Evelyn Blake wasn't an unfamiliar name. She had spoken at a professional ethics seminar nearly a year ago when I was still working at Altus Capital, my first job out of grad school. Back then, she was representing an independent legal advisory group that assisted financial fraud investigations. Now, she was calling directly, referencing Owen Chambers, and telling me I held the last puzzle piece in something far bigger than I had imagined. After the call, I spent nearly 2 hours deciding what to send, who to trust, and how not to put myself at a disadvantage. Finally, I pulled up my old contacts and paused at one name: Charlotte Reed. Charlotte used to head internal controls at Atlantic Pacific, where I had interned during graduate school. She was known for being tough, immune to internal politics. Months ago, when we crossed paths by chance, she had told me, "If you ever spot something off, and no one has the guts to say it, call me, or, at least, leave a trail." I didn't call. I wrote an email. Subject: urgent, suspicious, financial activity data. I kept it brief. "Charlotte, I hope you remember me. I have some files I believe you should see. This may be dangerous, but I can't stay silent. If you're open to it, I'd like to meet in person. No one else knows about this email. Thank you." I attached an encrypted PDF, 9 pages of red-flagged transaction chains, no names, no client identifiers. After sending it, I shut off my laptop, locked the full files in a separate drive, and went for a walk, even though it was close to 10 p.m. The next morning, Charlotte replied with a simple message. "Meet me on the 11th floor, Western Trust Building, 3 p.m. Use the rear elevator, no badge required." Western Trust was a small office complex not tied to any major firm, but discreet enough for quiet meetings. I arrived 10 minutes early, carrying a printed report, an encrypted drive, and a basic presentation outlining the suspected laundering loop. The room Charlotte picked sat at the end of the hallway, no nameplate. She wore a gray blazer, hair neatly tied back, and skipped pleasantries. Sit, she said, expression unreadable. I opened the folder and began walking her through every flow, every reroute, every unusual approval trail. She didn't interrupt, just nodded and took notes. When I finished, she leaned back, fingers interlaced. Have you spoken to anyone else about this? Or, only you and someone named Evelyn Blake. She paused, then reached into her drawer and handed me a blue business card. Monica Tyler, Senior Auditor, Independent Commission on Financial Conduct. Charlotte spoke slowly. I can't touch this directly, but Monica can. Still, Carter, once you send her this data, it's out of your control. They will investigate, but they'll also scrutinize you. I held the card in silence. Are you ready for that? She asked. Not entirely, but I know I'll regret it if I don't do something. Charlotte nodded. Then send it to Monica, but not from your personal email. They have a secure channel. I'll text you the link using a number you've never saved. I left Western Trust with the business card in hand and a sense I had crossed a line I could never walk back from. At 7 p.m., I got a message from an unknown number. This is Monica, referred by CR. Confirmed data channel, no names, no organization references. I complied. Within an hour, I had uploaded the full file set to the secure portal, no trace left on my machine. At exactly 11 p.m., a knock hit my door. I didn't answer right away. I checked the doorbell camera. There stood a woman in a black coat, short blonde hair, pressed close to the wall. She looked up into the lens and whispered, My name is Monica Tyler. I don't reach out this way unless absolutely necessary. But we just detected unauthorized access to Patterson and Miles's internal system within the last 2 hours. Someone knows you've shared the data. I opened the door. Monica stepped in without asking questions. We need to leave, now. I had just left the temporary hotel Monica arranged when I found a thick envelope waiting at the door of my new room. No sender, no delivery notice, just one cold printed line. Internal documents, immediate response, I opened it. Inside was a letter from the legal office of Langston and Crosswell, representing Patterson and Miles. They accused me of severe data security violations, intellectual property theft, spreading false information harmful to corporate reputation, and possibly inciting internal unrest. One section stood out, bold and capitalized. Many are not in expectation sharing or exploitation of this information will result in full legal action to the maximum extent permitted. Not even 15 minutes later, my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring 3 times before picking up. Carter, it's me. Brett. His voice no longer carried its usual coldness. Instead, it trembled slightly, like he was trying to hold something back beneath a polished mask. I'm listening, I replied, keeping my voice steady and calm. This has gone too far, he said, but I believe you're someone who understands reason. We both made mistakes in how this was handled. I don't want to destroy the future of someone who once had real promise. I said nothing. You're young, Carter. You've got an entire career ahead of you. A minor conflict like this isn't worth losing everything, Brett continued. If you're willing to withdraw your complaints and sign a non-disclosure agreement, we could consider reinstating your position, or at least open a new opportunity for you at a strategic partner firm. No one ever has to know this happened. You fired me not long ago, and now you're offering to reintegrate me just to shut me up? I asked, unable to hide the disgust in my tone. You don't understand what you're stepping into. This isn't about a few suspicious transactions. The people behind this, they're unlike anyone you've dealt with before. Then why are you so shaken that you had to call me in the middle of the night? I cut in. I'm not easily intimidated. There was a pause on the other end. Then his voice dropped. You're making a mistake you'll have to live with for the rest of your life. Good, I said. At least I'll live with it, not crawl under it. I hung up. The next morning, I went to the attorney's office Monica had recommended. Their firm was located on the 6th floor of an unremarkable building on the west side of the city, though the security setup felt like something from a federal agency. I was met by Camille Prescott, a lawyer specializing in major whistleblower cases. She defended a chemical engineer during a massive industrial scandal a few years back. Camille listened through the entire situation without interrupting. Once I was done, she spoke slowly. You've entered a spiral you can't exit. which also means they can't stop either. You need to understand, Carter. What you're doing comes with real consequences. They'll sue, they'll smear you, they'll twist the facts to turn you into the villain. I understand, but I can't stay silent anymore. Camille nodded, eyes still scanning the file. Good. First step is securing you legally. I'll draft a formal response today, demanding Patterson and Miles retract their threats and acknowledge retaliating against a whistleblower, something clearly prohibited by federal law. She looked at me, her voice firm. From this point forward, all communication with them goes through me. Do not answer any calls, texts, or emails, especially from anyone still at the company. Also, I'll need copies of everything you've kept, including handwritten notes. Leave nothing out. I nodded, pulling the portable hard drive from my coat pocket, the only device holding the original encrypted transaction chain. Camille plugged it into her secure computer, verifying the digital signature and encryption layers. Looks good, she said. Now sit tight, let me get to work. I sat silently as line after line of legal text scrolled across her screen. Cold, precise language, fighting fire with fire, using the same weapons people like Brett once used to bury others. But this time, I wasn't alone. Outside the window, light rain had started, not the kind that bites through your skin, just a steady tapping, like something preparing itself quietly before a storm. Close to midnight, I was alone in the temporary apartment Camille had arranged when the doorbell rang. No warning, no text in advance. I checked the peephole. Monica was standing outside, not in her usual office clothes, but in a long black coat, arms wrapped around a document bag and an old laptop. When I opened the door, she stepped in quickly, pulled the curtain shut, and whispered, "I can't stay long, but you need to see this." She sat at the kitchen table, pulled out a tiny USB, and plugged it into her laptop. Patterson and Miles's internal system was accessed from an external server last night. When we traced it, we found someone was wiping backup files, most likely cleaning up evidence. I leaned in toward the screen. Inside the USB were dozens of folders labeled with company names: Edelman Logistics, Quinn & Mercer, Bayfield Solutions. None directly tied to Patterson and Miles, but all had something in common. They'd all transacted with Altus Capital in the past 2 years. Monica pointed at an encrypted spreadsheet. I had a third-party technician crack it today. The data shows they weren't just using shell companies to drain money from Patterson and Miles. They were cycling it through 3 other partner entities. The total transaction value exceeds $48 million in just 11 months. I swallowed hard. Anyone high up involved? She nodded, scrolling through extracted emails. Most of the approvals came from Caleb Weston, Regional Operations Director for the South. I'd seen Caleb once during a regular strategy meeting. He hadn't listened to anyone, just stared at his phone the entire time. I used to think that was executive arrogance. Turns out, it was cover. Worse, Monica added, pulling up another file. His emails were CC'd to an internal address: jh-direct@pmholdings.us. That mailbox doesn't appear on the official employee registry. I frowned. Who's JH? She opened a set of images taken from office surveillance, an older man exiting a boardroom, Caleb right behind him. I'd never seen his face before, but I'd heard the name since Altus. James Halbrook, CEO of Patterson and Miles. The man who signed off on every strategic deal. The man who never appeared at company events. I once thought he was just a figurehead. Now I knew he was real, and he was at the center of it all. Monica leaned in, her voice almost a whisper. James isn't acting alone. The true mastermind is someone the entire financial industry thinks is untouchable. She opened another file, a diagram showing interconnected investments between Patterson and Miles and 3 satellite companies. In the center, written in red, Logan Ashcroft. I froze. Logan was the current CEO of Stratton Holdings, a financial empire managing nearly $200 billion in assets, ranked among the top 10 in the country. Why would someone like him get involved in this? I asked, feeling like reality had just flipped upside down. Monica looked at me, her gaze more serious than ever. At that level, it's not about money. It's about power. Because every dollar laundered through this system opens up a new investment channel no one can regulate. She shut the laptop, pulled out the USB drive, and placed it in my hand. Carter, now you understand why they're willing to do anything to silence a whistleblower. If you still choose to go forward, I'll back you to the end. But there's no turning back. I stared at the USB. Inside it was evidence of more than just money laundering. It exposed a system built by some of the most powerful players in the financial world. People who could erase someone from existence with a single keystroke. I nodded, slow and firm. Monica stood, buttoned her coat. Before stepping out the door, she turned back. Guard that carefully. If you lose it, we've got nothing left to fight with. The door shut behind her. I stood alone, heart pounding like a warning drum. But inside, I had never felt more clear-headed. At 3 p.m. that Monday, Monica picked me up in a silver SUV with no plates, parked outside an abandoned train station in the suburbs. No explanation, no map. Just told me to get in and turn off my phone. She drove through 3 separate detours before pulling into a government facility tucked behind a crumbling parking lot, once part of a closed medical center. The building had no sign, only a steel door and a rotating camera. Monica knocked twice, then rang a buzzer. A female voice responded through the speaker. Identify yourself. Monica Tyler, pre-scheduled, accompanied by one priority-level witness. The door unlocked with the grind of heavy bolts. We passed through 3 layers of security, each requiring fingerprint scans and personal access codes. Finally, we were led into a windowless room. 1 metal table, 3 chairs. A woman in her 40s, dressed in a gray shirt with dark hair tied neatly, stepped in. She didn't introduce herself. Monica did. Senior Agent Lillian Grant, Financial Crimes and Anti-Laundering Division, FBI. Lillian sat down and placed a thick file on the table. You're Carter Anderson? I nodded. Did you bring physical copies of the documents? I took the USB Monica gave me the day before out of my bag, along with a printed packet, 110 pages of transaction flows, internal emails, and suspicious routing charts. Lillian inspected each item carefully. Once she confirmed they hadn't been tampered with, she motioned for her assistant to bring the encryption drive. We've been monitoring Patterson and Miles for over 8 months, Lillian said evenly. But everything stalled because we lacked a critical piece, direct insider evidence. What you've brought, Carter, is the missing link. I asked, so, does that mean the FBI is officially opening an investigation? She looked straight at me. Not opening, it's already open. But after today, this case will be elevated to a national level. It may involve several major firms and interstate financial networks. If you agree to full cooperation, I'll file for immediate witness protection. I didn't respond right away. Part of me knew what that meant. My identity would be controlled, my freedom limited, my old life no longer accessible. You don't have to answer now, Lillian added, sensing my hesitation. But as of this moment, you and your data are under priority protection. Monica finally spoke, breaking a 10-minute silence. Carter, we both know this is bigger than any one person. If you walk out of this room without signing on as a federal witness, they will bury the evidence before morning. I looked down at my old employee ID in my wallet. Carter Anderson might not exist on paper for a long time. I agree to cooperate. Fully, I said. Lillian immediately pulled out a thick set of forms. We'll need you to sign a confidentiality agreement and consent to all FBI protocols during the investigation. You'll be relocated within 24 hours under a new identity. She paused, then added, until then, no contact with former associates, no logins to personal accounts, and no unencrypted devices. Signed, the pen felt colder than any contract I'd ever put my name on. Afterward, I was taken to a small apartment inside a secure compound on the city's north end. No signage, no neighbors, plainclothes agents stationed outside, and one officer sitting quietly in the living room as if it was just another workday. That night I sat by the window, staring at the quiet courtyard. Just months ago I was an analyst chasing deadlines and clean spreadsheets. Now I was part of a federal probe, standing against people with 100 times my influence. But I didn't regret it. If I didn't stand up, who would? A faint vibration from the encrypted comm device broke the silence. A message from Lillian. Get ready. The first phase begins tomorrow morning. I set the device down, took a deep breath, and turned off the light. The dark didn't scare me anymore. What kept me alert was light in the wrong places. That morning, I wasn't woken by an alarm clock, but by the calm voice of the on-duty agent. It's time, everything's in motion. He handed me a headset and a small screen, live feed from the FBI's operations center. On it, red dots marked the raid locations. Patterson and Miles HQ, 3 regional offices, and James Holbrook's estate in Fair Oaks. Everything began at exactly 9:02 a.m. Central Time. On screen, tactical units split into 3 teams. The first moved in on Patterson and Miles HQ from 2 directions. One at the front entrance, another from the underground garage. No sirens, no warnings, just fast, precise footsteps and a commanding shout, "FBI, hands up and stay where you are!" Glass shattered under breaching tools. I recognized the front lobby, where I once badged in each morning, now filled with screaming, flying papers, and panic stares. Brett Langston was taken from his 8th-floor office. He didn't resist, didn't shout, just stared at the ground as if he had known this day was coming. Meanwhile, at Fair Oaks, roughly 20 miles away, an armored convoy pulled up outside James Holbrook's estate. Agents in heavy gear entered while snipers held positions on nearby rooftops. Live updates rolled in. James was arrested in his study. No resistance, no escape attempt, but agents found encrypted files on his personal server, most linked to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, Belize, and a few other shadowy locations. One file stood out, titled Meridian Clean Flow, Route Backup 2022, undeniable proof of a cross-border laundering scheme. Elsewhere, a young agent monitoring the coordination hub reported, "We've located 37 accounts tied to European banking systems, anonymous, but all using the same encryption protocols as Patterson and Miles." Monica's face appeared on screen shortly after, visibly tense. "All records confirmed. Holbrook's assets have been frozen. Zurich, Deutsche and Capital Link banks received freeze orders under Interpol coordination." I stood up from my chair and stared at the screen. There was Brett being escorted through the main lobby where I once waited for elevators, now in handcuffs, leaving quietly. Another agent chimed in. "We've made contact with Jennifer. She's at Security Post 2, stable, being relocated to a safer location per the updated plan." Hearing Jennifer's name lifted a weight off my shoulders. The person who once handed me that first business card, the one who dared to look straight at a corrupt system and tell me, "If you ever see something wrong, knock on my door." She had survived the first storm. Less than an hour later, Trevor, the one who had vanished without a trace, suddenly walked into the FBI office with a suitcase full of original documents he had safeguarded for 6 months. Inside was a financial contract between Holbrook and a tech company in Singapore, an entity once suspected of facilitating disguised cryptocurrency trafficking. After reading through the files, Lillian Grant said only one thing: "This game is more complicated than we thought." That afternoon, every major news network broadcast the story. FBI raids financial conglomerate headquarters in global money laundering probe. My name wasn't mentioned, but one line in the report sent chills down my spine. Sources from the investigation confirmed the case was uncovered with help from an internal witness, now under highest-level protection. I turned off the TV. What I felt wasn't victory, but a clear realization this was only the beginning. That system wasn't just a few arrests or frozen accounts. It was a deeply rooted network that could regrow unless cut out at the root. 9 months after the raid, final sentences were handed down in federal court in Houston. James Holbrook received 27 years in prison for organized money laundering, financial fraud, and obstructing a federal investigation. Logan Ashcroft, though he hadn't directly approved transactions, was sentenced to 14 years for orchestrating cross-border siphoning. Caleb Weston and 3 other regional executives were handed sentences ranging from 8 to 12 years. Brett Langston, the man who once ran our office behind a polished mask, received a significantly reduced sentence after fully cooperating with the FBI. He was sentenced to 4 years of probation, placed under supervision, and ordered to return all bonuses he had earned from related transactions. When asked during sentencing if he had any regrets, he answered coldly, "I trusted the wrong people at the wrong time. I didn't need a name to know who he meant." Patterson and Miles declared bankruptcy just 2 weeks after the ruling. Their assets were liquidated, headquarters shuttered, and their client list handed over to a temporary federal management team. A name once feared across the southern financial market was now just a line in a federal case file, tied to one of the biggest financial scandals of the decade. I never returned to the old office. No one asked me to, and I had no reason to. But throughout the trial, I showed up for every hearing, sat in the front row, answered every question, recalled every detail. Even when exhausted, I never stepped back. Every testimony was a piece of truth that needed life. A few weeks after the verdict, I received a call from a number I thought I'd long deleted. Camille Prescott, the lawyer who had stood by me from the very first day. Her voice was brighter than usual. "Congratulations, Carter. The SEC just approved your whistleblower award. 15% of the total recovered penalties. You might want to sit down before I read the number." That sum didn't change who I was, but it absolutely changed my life. I used part of it to buy a small house on the west side of San Antonio. The one with the old orchard my grandmother used to dream of owning. The rest went into funding a nonprofit education trust dedicated to hosting seminars that teach finance students about ethical risks in the profession. Lillian Grant once told me, "Justice isn't just in the sentencing. It's in making sure the same mistakes aren't repeated." I held on to those words as my guiding compass when I was invited to speak at my alma mater. The classroom was packed. Young students filled the hallway, notebooks in hand, writing down every word as I explained how a simple spreadsheet, handled correctly, could bring down an empire. Jennifer now works with an international organization that supports tracking illegal financial flows. We keep in touch, not often, but enough to know we're both still on the right path. Trevor moved into tech consulting in Oregon. He once told me, "As long as I never have to look at another payment ledger, I'll call that a win." Monica was promoted to Deputy Federal Coordinator for Interagency Financial Crime Cases. One time, she messaged me a single sentence: "That day, you made the right call." One fall afternoon, while watering the backyard, I got a message from a student who had attended my seminar. "I just found an inconsistency in our internal budget report. If it weren't for your class, I probably would have ignored it." I stood still for a moment. The wind rustled through the fence, carrying the faint scent of jasmine. I didn't reply right away, but I felt a strange peace. I'm not a hero. I was scared. I wanted to quit. But I didn't look away. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't start with a siren or a courtroom. It starts when you stare at a number that doesn't add up on a screen and choose not to ignore it. Carter's story is proof that one brave individual can shake an entire system of power. From an unknown financial analyst, he chose not to stay silent in the face of corruption, despite the threats and danger. Through integrity and resolve, he didn't just bring justice forward, he inspired a new generation to value professional ethics. In a world where truth is often buried, Carter stood tall, and that choice changed everything. What do you think about Carter's decision? Would you do the same when facing a powerful, risky system? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more meaningful stories about life and family.